Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Happy Halloween if you celebrate Halloween. If you do not, welcome anyway. This is a live stream looking at some of the spookier elements of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's just going to be me today, but we've got a lot of questions to get through from my patrons and all the rest of it. I think I'll take this off for now, if that's okay. But I wanted to start by saying just a few little things as by way of an update for those of you who haven't heard. We've had some quite big news recently about what's going on in the world of Game of Thrones and spin-offs and all the rest of it. So we got two bits of news, one straight after the other. The first one was, for me, very disappointing news that we are not any longer going to be getting the spin-off that was going under the title of Blood Moon. This was one that George R.R. Martin kept on referring to as The Long Night. This was set thousands of years ago. This was going to be Jane Goldman was going to be heading this up. It was going to be heavy on the Children of the Forest, the origins of the White Walkers, things like that. They took that a long way in development. It had a pilot which was filmed. It went into post-production. HBO decided not to go ahead with that. Now, there are many rumors as to why that might be, but the end result is the same, is that we are not going to see that. However, HBO confirmed literally within a few hours that they had commissioned an entire series, 10 full episodes, without even seeing a pilot, of a second spin-off idea that we'd heard about, which was one based on Fire and Blood, George R.R. Martin's history of the Targaryens. Now, this it is a little bit of a surprise in one sense, because they haven't gone for a pilot. It still seems to be quite a long way away from being completed. George R.R. Martin, he's talked at reasonable length about this on his blog, his Not a Blog, very well worth checking out if you haven't seen that already. And it's very clear that they haven't written the 10 episodes. They were just pitching for a pilot, so they've still got a huge amount of writing to do. Then they've got all the casting to do and pre-production and all the rest of it. So we're still not going to get this for a long time. Don't expect anything, certainly for a year, probably for a couple of years. In terms of what it is, we've got not much more information. But what we do know is that George R.R. Martin refers us to a couple of anthologies, short story anthologies that he co-edited many years ago, which he put some short stories in, from which Fire and Blood came out. Now, these two short stories, one of them is about Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince, and one of them is about the sort of the build-up to the Dance of the Dragons. So it's very clear that this is going to be the focus. I think that the idea that this might start really early on with Aegon's conquest and all the rest of it, I think that's looking more unlikely now. What is looking more likely is a long build-up to the Dance of the Dragons, starting around the time when Daemon Targaryen was younger, when he was this kind of he's a great character, incidentally, if you've not come across him in Fire and Blood, when he was this kind of rogue character who was both the best and the worst of people of that age. And it's going to be focusing on him and this split within the Targaryen family that ultimately led to their downfall with the end of the dragons. So that's what we're looking at. As I say, I don't think we're going to see it for a couple of years. We've got very little information still. They've announced that Miguel Sapochnik, who was one of the directors on Game of Thrones, who directed the Battle of the Bastards, as well as the Long Night episode in season 8. He is on board effectively as a co-showrunner, and he's going to be directing the first episode as well. So we've not got huge amounts of extra news, but this is clearly HBO showing that although they have decided not to go ahead with The Long Night, Blood Moon, they are still incredibly invested in having a successor show to Game of Thrones. The one thing that I would say is positive in this is, well, there are many things that are positive, but one thing which I think is particularly positive is George R. R. Martin, on his blog post, confirmed that this was the first idea that he personally pitched to HBO when they were thinking about successor shows. This was the idea well before Fire and Blood was written, the idea that he had that then other people have started running with. So this is his vision. He is going to be involved in it. He's not going to let it sidetrack him from writing The Winds of Winter. He's promised that, but he is actively involved in the development of it, and he was from the inception of the idea. So that's a little bit of an update on what's going on in the world of Game of Thrones. Just wanted to say a quick thank you to a couple of people for some super stickers. Maura Lee, before we went on air, thank you so much. And Morgan R.R. Hayes as well, thank you. That's very kind. And I think, so Kwezia Ali, I hope I pronounced that correctly, saying happy Halloween and thanks for the great content. You're very welcome. Thank you so much. That's very kind. I think a lot of people, their reaction is probably the same as mine in terms of what's going on with those two spin-off ideas, is that clearly Targaryens and dragons is the safe option, the easy option, the thing that people are going to be most excited about, not just nerds like me, but just general Game of Thrones fans will find it easier to access something that they understand, that has got Targaryens and dragons, it's based in King's Landing, things like that they will know, rather than something which was based thousands of years ago without any dragons or Targaryens, before House Stark and all the rest of it. That would have been a very, very different feel. So this is very clearly a safe choice. It's also very clearly George R. R. Martin's initial first choice as well. So that's where we're at. Let's get back to what we were going to be talking about today, which is some of the spookier aspects of Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire. And we're just going to move around a lot of different. We've had quite a few questions about the Weirwoods, which, when you think about them, they are quite terrifying. And people coming back from the dead and all these kind of things. So that's what we're going to be going on from. Thank you. Just saw Lehidu Dinalankara. Thank you so much. Saying, hi, Robert. Wonder if we will see the real Iron Throne. You know, the one that could kill you if you slip. Yeah. So this, for those who don't know, the Iron Throne that we saw on the show, it looks cool, but it is a pale shadow of how George R. R. Martin describes it in the books. In the books, there are many, many steps leading up to it. It's massive, it's jaggedy, uncomfortable to sit on. It cuts people, and so the show did away with that for ease as much as anything else. Now, this does. It's probably worth a video at some point when I get time. But the Iron Throne does cut people in a lot of kind of significant moments, almost as if casting judgment. And this is perhaps how some people have interpreted casting judgment on certain kings or queens or people who sat there. Some would sit incredibly uncomfortably on it. Aegon I, memorably, when he received a letter effectively about the fate of his sister, he gripped it so tight, blood sort of came from his hand. Famously, one king has been killed by it, several others have been badly injured by it. There's a lot of story built into the fact that this is not an easy chair to sit on. This is not just a pretty throne. Will we see it? I suspect that they will probably keep the same design as we've had for the Iron Throne, so that people, sort of general viewers, will know what it is. But they might make it slightly more jaggedy. Who knows? They might. This is going to be a couple of 100 years before what we have, so that there's every reason to say yes, that they might have made it slightly nicer over time. But yeah, I hope they make it slightly more jaggedy. I don't think we're going to see the exact thing that George R. R. Martin was describing. Probably going to be based on what we've seen already, but possibly slightly more jaggedy. Mary Ann Hadley, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, don't forget the scary Weirwood tree near Craster's. Yeah, we're going to come to that. One of my patrons asked about the Weirwood tree at White Wall, I think it was called. So we will come to that. We've got a lot of questions on Weirwood trees, which we will come to in just one moment. Let's go with, well, Ali Al-Muhu, I always mispronounce your name, I'm sorry, Al-Muhana, saying, not sure if this applies, but would you talk about the idols in the House of Black and White? And I'm very happy to do this. So I think what you're talking about are the statues that are there in the House of Black and White. And the reason why I'm very happy, as well as I'm happy to answer any questions from my patrons, but particular reason why is that we, particularly having seen the show, we quite often take a slightly less sinister view of a lot of things that were there. We look at what happens in particularly Arya's storyline, and we see it as this is her training to be a kick-ass assassin. It's not that scary. When you read in the books, it is scary, and when you think about it, this is a death cult that this girl has suddenly found herself falling into. There's skulls with worms crawling out of them. She's people, dead bodies. She's treating dead bodies. That's where people literally come in to commit suicide. This is a scary place, and it's dark, no windows in it. And all around the outside of this main area, when you go into it on the main floor, there are these statues around the outside, and these are statues of a variety of different gods, all of whom the adherents of the faceless men, the many-faced god, that they believe are aspects of the many-faced god. So, for example, the black goat of Qohor, who demands a sacrifice every day, there's a statue of him, and various of these other gods, particularly in Essos. Going through in the Traveller's Guide, we come across lots of these rather obscure gods, a lot of whom seem to demand blood sacrifice, and these are the different aspects of the many-faced god, they believe. So, yes, this is quite spooky. And if you imagine as a young child entering it and looking up and around, and these things that are being worshipped, each and every one of them, the way to worship them is to kill somebody. And that is really quite dark and ominous when you think about it. It's not just a story about how Arya is training up to get really good at fighting. This is a story about how she is losing part of her soul, effectively, to steel herself to all the things that she's there. She is losing her childhood. She's growing up. She's actually no longer seeing death and suffering as terrible things. They're just part and parcel of life now, to a degree. Obviously, everyone has to go through that process, but for her, it was just completely rammed down her throat, and that is quite a scary thing. Marvin Martin, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, speaking of Daemon and Dance, why didn't more Targaryens bond to dragons the way Nettles did? Right. So this is taking us back to um, the Dance of the Dragons. Now, the situation there was that they had on Dragonstone more dragons than Targaryens. That was basically the situation. Now, what they then looked at for were, are there any people here who wish to try their luck at riding a dragon? Perhaps they might have some Targaryen or Valyrian heritage in them. Nettles, for example, was a person who didn't look even slightly Valyrian. She had a dark complexion, curly dark hair, brown eyes, not the typical Valyrian appearance. She bonded with a dragon called Sheepstealer. Now, there's a whole train of thought there about does this mean that you need to have Targaryen or Valyrian blood in you in order to be bonding with dragons? Clearly, it's not necessary for it to be, 100%. But also, there's why more Targaryens didn't bond to dragons. They were literally running out of Targaryens, is the issue, and they were moving on to Valerians, and after that, they were then moving on to anyone else who they thought might be able to. And they basically they opened it up to anyone to have a go, and lots of people tried, and lots of people died. I hope that answers that question for you. Jared from Patreon says, Lady Stoneheart reads like she is right out of a Stephen King story. Imagine seeing the wolf drag her out of the river. Watching her take her revenge on those that destroyed her family would be very spooky indeed. Agreed. This is one of the things which wasn't on the show that George R. R. Martin was most disappointed by is the absence of Lady Stoneheart. Now, the way that we saw her being rescued was that this was done by Nymeria, Arya's direwolf, and we kind of see it through her eyes. Arya is effectively wagging into her and drags her out. This is Nymeria in control. Arya's sort of along for the ride and seeing what's going on. And it is kind of described as being, this is the riverside, and you can almost see the mist and the body being dragged out by wolf and left to be found. And then, yes, this is not just somebody who sort of died and come back, like we might see Jon Snow on the show, who came back, had a few little cuts on him, but otherwise looked just as pretty as he always did. Lady Stoneheart does not look like that. She was in the water for days. Her throat is cut open, so her vocal cords are on display, but not really working. It's really quite gruesome. So, yeah, I agree. This, for me, that is one of the scariest things. And the fact that she is so single-minded, and yet we can't hear her articulate things that well. Therefore, it creates this kind of otherworldly, who is she? We don't actually understand her. And that, for me, is one of the key elements of horror, is this lack of understanding. We do not know exactly what drives her. We think we know. We think we understand. Clearly, she's after revenge. But what level of revenge does she want? How many people does she want to kill? What would lead her to end her sort of rampage of violence? What would give her satisfaction? So that is that's where I agree. Lady Stoneheart is indeed one of the spookiest characters. Lahiru Dinalankara, again, thank you so much, saying, tell us about Accolon, the Pale Child, and the Steel Angels who worshipped them, and in Seven Times Never Kill Man, worshipped by killers. Yes, so this is, I'm going to have to hold up my hands and say that I won't be able to give a full answer on this one because I would have to research it. So this is Accolon. who is one of the gods worshipped in Tyrosh, I think. Certainly one of those three free cities is either Mir or Tyrosh, and is this bloodthirsty god who is blamed for the kidnapping of children and deaths, because basically children go missing in the city, and people just say, this must be Akalon. Probably isn't. It's probably the slavers, but this is a fearsome creature. This is another one of the gods which is in the House of Black and White, incidentally, with the statues going on there. Now, one thing George R.R. Martin has done a few times is he's pulled concepts out, not just from other writers. We know that he sometimes kind of borrows things from other writers or pays homage to other writers, but he also takes concepts from other stories that he's written. So this is what you're referencing here. I have not read that story, I will have to admit, so I do not know, and so I don't think I'd be able to comment on that one. But yeah, this is quite a scary god that we've got going on here. There are quite a lot of them when you go through Essos, actually. Westeros is, yes, it's got its scary gods and all the rest of it, but when you get to Essos, they're everywhere. There's a proliferation of gods. Every city seems to have, another half dozen that you've never heard of before, and some of them are pretty scary. There's a lot of blood sacrifices going on. So thank you for that. Jared also on Patreon says, one of the spookiest chapters in the entire series is the initial prologue, where we see how scary and formidable the White Walkers are when they come upon the Rangers. Even though the reader has little idea about the direction of the plot at this point, we are still creeped out because the White Walkers are like us. They have language, weapons, and bad intent, but they are unlike us. Humans are nearly powerless against their cold power. Scary. Yeah, so this kind of brings me back to what I was talking about just a moment ago, which is the key to horror for me is very often the not knowing, the not understanding, the not quite getting what's going on here. And when one of the beautiful things about that prologue, when we get the Rangers encountering the others, we do not know what the others are. In the books, we still don't really know what the others are. We don't know what they want. We don't know the extent of their powers and their strength. And that makes them scary, and that makes them other to us. That is what makes us not understand how we can possibly defeat them, because we do not understand why they're doing what they're doing and how we might be able to overcome that. This, incidentally, probably in my younger days, the scariest book I read was Dracula, the Bram Stoker classic. And I can remember reading it. I've no idea what age I was, but I was reading it and I was scared stiff, because this was before I'd watched any vampire films or before the proliferation of them in our culture. And I did not understand every single page. There seemed to be a new thing that this Dracula could do, and it seemed to me, how can they possibly defeat this super strong character who can turn into bats, who can climb sheer walls, who can just like keep on turning people to support him. It was astonishing. And that really chilled me to the core. And it's that same feel that I think that George R. R. Martin is trying to get for the others here, is this, what are their powers? What do they want? How could we possibly stop them? And that is why he has not told us straight away for 5 whole books much about them at all. We just know that they're scary. We know that they kill. We know that they're coming. And that's about it. So that is what George R. R. Martin is trying to achieve, and I think he did it beautifully in that prologue. Uh, Marianne Hadley saying so much cannibalism. Yes, the rat cook, Frey Pie, Jojen. Yeah, so we'll talk about the rat cook. I did get a question about the rat cook, which I shall come to. Doing good here on picking questions. We're coming to a little bit, so we'll definitely talk about that. Jojen Paste. I think Jared was also talking about Jojen Paste. This. Yeah, we'll talk about that again when we talk about the Weirwoods, but it's quite a yeah, it's very gruesome. It's never spelt out. Again, it's all in our minds. We don't know for sure, and that's what really makes it scary. If it was just there and clear what was going on, then it probably wouldn't be quite as scary. But the fact is that we're left to imagine what happened and why, and that is what, for me, is what makes it so scary. Shadow Fox saying, first of all, you were asking about the audio recordings I did of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter. I've replied to you over on Patreon, so hopefully you can get access to them quite easily now. Also saying, talking about Euron trying to become a god. I think I saw somebody in the chat just talking about Euron just a moment ago as well. Yeah, Anna Iglesias is talking about a new BBC Dracula show coming out by the showrunners of Sherlock. Yes, I am very excited. The trailer has come out. I've not seen it yet, but I'm very excited about that. But anyway, Euron. Euron, can we talk about Euron trying to become a god and the scary stuff he is doing to make that happen? So, I'm sure I don't need to say now, book Euron, very different to show Euron. Show Euron, yes, he was a little bit crazy, not the kind of person you'd want to spend the evening with, but book Euron is a completely different scale of things. He is absolutely insane. He's absolutely charismatic. You cannot take your eyes off of him, and he's got huge plans. Now, the plans that we know about are to take control of a dragon and to eventually take control of the Seven Kingdoms. But from what we see in the pre-release chapters, particularly the pre-release chapters, the Victorian chapters of, sorry, the not the Victorian ones, the Aaron, the damp hair chapters, chapter, it's very clear that actually Euron's plan is not just to get a dragon and become king. He is wanting to destroy Westeros. He is wanting, and probably Essos as well, he is wanting to destroy all the gods. He is wanting to be a god, the god himself. That is his aim. He is trying to become a god. And in order to do that, in his mind, obviously, you need some kind of huge magical spell, and he's trying to do it. There are a lot, we don't know all the details of exactly what he's doing, but we can start to put the pieces together. He has sent Victarion over to Stavers Bay, to Meereen, to try and take the dragons. He's given him Dragonbinder, and he's sent that over to the idea when that gets blown, then hopefully the dragons will get sort of bonded to Euron. There's a whole load of subplots going on there, but this is Euron's plan. While that's happening, and he appears to have timed this to happen the exact same time, there's going to be a huge battle going on over there. At the same time as there's going to be a huge sea battle happening off the south coast of Westeros, with his fleet up against the Red Wine fleet and the Imperial fleet, which is basically, it's the three biggest fleets in off Westeros, all coming together in one go. And what he's doing going into that battle is he is strapping priests, holy men, to the front of boats. He's going to kill them, sacrifice them. Add to which the woman that is bearing his unborn child, this is now, because he's the king of the Iron Islands, this is then royal blood, this is king's blood. She is also being strapped to the front of one of the boats. So he seems to be doing a huge sacrifice, 2 huge battles, holy men sacrificed, king's blood spilt, all in order to do something. Now, the something is, we do not know. We haven't been told, so we can just speculate. Yes, he's wanting to get dragons. I don't think it's just about getting dragons. There are rumors of krakens. We hear about krakens underneath the seas. Is he going to try and raise one of them? Possibly. He's clearly trying to take Old Town. Old Town is where all of the knowledge in Westeros is held there at Old Town. If he can somehow destroy Old Town and take control of the knowledge, that would be an astonishing thing. Basically, what he is going to do is he is going to do some huge rupture to whatever is going to the status quo down there. So everyone's going to stop just thinking about what's happening north of the wall and over in Meereen, but they're suddenly going to see right now down at the southwest of Westeros, there's another huge threat. So that's what he's doing. It is scary because he does not care about human life. He doesn't seem to care huge amounts about his own life. He's just charging through doing what he wants to do. Yes, it's scary. And it's scary because he is powerful and he is effective and he is charismatic and people are following him. And those kind of people everywhere in the world are incredibly dangerous, particularly when they do not care about human life. So yes, that is an incredibly scary thing. Lahiro Dina Lankara, thank you again, very kind. Saying, regarding the others controlling the dead, George R.R. Martin wrote a book called The Corpse Handler. Criminals have their brains replaced with a chip, killing them, and handlers control them by thoughts. I wonder if it's similar like that. Yes, to a degree, I think so. What seems to happen is that they have a sort of a version of Bran's powers, an inverse version of Bran's powers. So in the way that you think of Bran as being able to go into Hodor, take control of him, what Bran basically does is he goes into Hodor's brain and sort of pushes Hodor into a little corner and takes control of him and moves around like that. When you get even more powerful, then as a Green Seer, then you can control more than just one person or thing. You can control ravens, you can control a lot of different things at the same time. This seems to be the same for the others, except that they can do it over dead bodies. So once the spirit or the soul has gone, that's the point at which they can go in and take control of the body. So that seems to be what's going on. The controlling with a chip seems to be a kind of a sci-fi version of what's going on with the whites, the ice whites this is. They are being controlled by the others to go off and do what they do. And that means that sometimes they have control of them just to have them lying down. That's what happened right in the first book when Jon and others discovered some bodies of some dead Night's Watchmen. But they were being controlled just to lie down until they animated them and they could start trying to attack people. So yes, I think that I agree. It's a good analogy, and it comes back to what I was saying a moment ago. George R.R. Martin does take ideas that he's used elsewhere and bring them into A Song of Ice and Fire. But that obviously is a more sci-fi idea, and what he's doing now is magic-based rather than sci-fi based. Marvin Martin, thank you so much. What scary thing do you think Bran saw beyond the north? What do you think is beneath the corpse city? Right, so this is Bran early on, actually, in book 1. He sees all the way, he has his vision of going to the heart of winter, effectively, to what we think, it's never explicitly said, but what we think is the sort of the home base of the others. I think that what this is literally just that. I think that he saw the others there preparing to march and preparing to move, because at that point in time there were several others wandering around sort of north of the wall, just going from village to village, but they weren't at that time in a massive army moving. I think what he saw was the start of the massive army, the army of the dead, and I think that is what was there. So in terms of sort of beneath the corpse city, then I think this is the same kind of idea. What we're talking about is Bran saw the threat. He didn't understand it, but he saw the threat and he saw why he had to be going north. So I think that's what the answer there is. And incidentally, there's a good chance, I would say, that we might get more of Bran's visions of going to the north in the Winds of Winter. George R. R. Martin has said that in the Winds of Winter, we will see further north, or we'll go further north than we have so far. And we've gone as far as the Fist of the First Men, which is quite far north. Hardhome is south of that. Bloodraven's Cave is south of that. So what is north of that? It's where the others are. So I think that's what we're going to see. And whose eyes might we see that through? I think there's only a couple of options, really. Either someone like Ghost ranging all the way north, although that would take a very long journey, or going through Bran's green site. Those for me are the only real options about if we're going to see what's all the way north, which we have been promised by George R. R. Martin. Okay. We have got quite a few questions about the dead in Winterfell, which we will come to. I think what I'll do first is, as I normally do about halfway through these live streams, is just to say what's coming up on this channel. A few people are asking, I talked about doing a video on the pink letter, which is a fascinating subject. We saw it briefly in the book. It was on the show, and we only saw it briefly in the book, to be honest. But it's a very important letter because it's the letter which goads Jon into going to Winterfell. Now, it's very important in the books because it was that which prompted him to effectively quit the Night's Watch and prompted him being killed. He didn't, in the books, he didn't quit after he came back from the dead. That wasn't what happened at all. He effectively said, I've had this letter, I'm going to abandon my post, I'm going down to Winterfell, who's coming with me? At which point he got killed. That was all prompted by this letter. And so the question is, who sent that letter? In whose interest was it to try and goad Jon into going to Winterfell? So I've got a video which I kind of promised last week. It's very nearly done. I'll be honest, the reason why there's a slight delay on that was I found a sponsor for it, which I was very excited by. I've not had a sponsor for any video for like 2 years. So I'm very excited about that. So it will be coming out. It will be coming out, I think, on the 6th which is just under a week away. So it is happening. I'm very excited, and I've loved making that video. It's been fantastic. So anyway, I've got that. I've got the Traveler's Guide is picking up again. Apologies, I know my channel's been quite quiet for the last couple of weeks. The Traveler's Guide is starting up again this week, tomorrow, in fact. And we will be getting back into Lord of the Rings content as well. I'm going to be looking this time at the One Ring, the Ring. What actually is it? What powers does it actually have? Because, you know, you watch the films, you read the book, you go, well, apparently it's the most important artifact in the entire world, but what does it actually do? It makes you invisible. It allows you to do some kind of like astral sight thing. It seems to make you go a little bit crazy. Is that it? So I'm going to look in, that is not it, is the answer, but I'm going to look in detail about what it actually is and why it's so important, not just in the Third Age, where we get the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, but also the Second Age, which is where we're going to be having the Amazon TV show is going to be based. So there's a lot to talk about there. Actually, the reason I paused was I suddenly realized that the two shows, the Amazon Lord of the Rings show and the spin-off, the House of the Dragon spin-off, may well appear roughly the same sort of time, which will be quite a good time for people like me who like both of these two different stories. So yeah, they're roughly the same stage of production. Maybe the Lord of the Rings is slightly ahead, but they're still at roughly the same stage of production. And for those who've been asking about the Well-Told Tale, and incidentally, Maura Lee, thank you. I saw you did a super chat before we went live. Maura, thank you. You know how much I appreciate your support. Saying happy Halloween to you, Robert, and everyone in the chat. Just my usual show of love and support for the amazing content on both channels. Miss hearing the wonderful stories on the Well-Told Tale. The Well-Told Tale has been taking a break for a few weeks. It will be relaunched very soon, and it is going to be relaunched not just as a YouTube channel, but as a podcast, as a separate podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. So that's what the pause is there. That's going to be up and running again very soon. So thank you for your patience on that one. That is going to be back up and running soon. That's our friendly neighborhood nitpicker. Thank you so much for the super chat. Said, do we know if the pattern maker faith is a Zelazny tribute? I think it is. I think I've heard George R.R. Martin say that it is. There's a lot of, he does a lot of tributes, like the deep ones are tributes to H.P. Lovecraft and so on. I think I've heard him say that is. I'm sure somebody in the chat will know the answer to that. I think I've read something in So Spake Martin, which those who do not know is a collection of all the things George R.R. Martin's ever said about Song of Ice and Fire, because he's been very tight-lipped for quite a long time. When he does say something interesting, people have recorded it and put it onto there. So I'm sure someone in the chat will be able to confirm that one, but I think the answer is yes, it is. So we were going to talk about the Stark Dead. Andrew Curzon says, does the way the show represented the Stark Dead being risen from the crypt and the way they then proceeded to attack whoever was close by make you rethink how they will be revived and what they may do in the books? Personally, I still think or hope it will be very different in the books. So, no, it didn't make me rethink anything. Not much of season 8 made me rethink what I think is going to happen in the books, I have to say. A couple of things did, but not much. I think the fact that the Stark Dead did rise is a hint that they will rise in the books. Now, I don't think we need that hint. I think that it is abundantly clear that the Stark Dead have got a role to play here. George R. R. Martin, we always talk about George R. R. Martin breaking the rules, but he actually most of the times plays with the rules. He sticks by them, and he might tinker around a little bit, but he sticks by the rules of writing. And he has created underneath Winterfell this army, I think that's what it is, of dead Starks. And he's not just made this, oh, this is an interesting thing. He repeatedly draws our attention to it, repeatedly uses language which makes us think that they're alive in some way, conscious in some way. If you read that first chapter when Robert Baratheon comes up to Winterfell and Ned shows him down to the crypts, it's that the language is so strong. It's almost as if the crypts are breathing, as if the crypts are some kind of iron lung in some way. Then you get there, Ned Stark feels their eyes on him. He feels that they're judging him, these statues of all these old dead Starks. When Theon goes down there, he feels the same. Jon has dreams about going down there and of these dead Starks speaking to him, saying that he doesn't belong there. Again and again and again, we get these images of these dead Starks as being still there in some way. And so I think that there is no way that they are not going to be used going forward. Even in the most recent few chapters of the Dance with the Dragons, we get characters who are interested in the crypts. We get Lady Barbary Dustin, who's interested in the crypts. We get Mance Rayder, who's interested in the crypts. We get lots of people who are just always bringing our attention back to the crypts of Winterfell. So they are central, and I think that they will come, that the Stark dead will come back. My take is that they will come back on the side of the living, on the side of the Starks against the army of the dead, rather than the other way around. I think that's what it is, and I think that they are protected from the power of the I was going to say the Night King, but the power of the others by the way that they've been buried in there. I think there is strong magic around there. Guest writers is being withheld from that place, so people, the magic can't go in. I think all of the hints and clues are that the Stark dead will rise again. Maura Lee says, a lot of us are hoping to see in the books the Horn of Winter being blown and the Stark dead be able to rise and help defend Winterfell. Yes, that is my theory. If you're interested in it, I've gone through this in a reasonable amount of detail. The video is called something like The Horn of Winter and the Crypts of Winterfell. Do go and have a look for that if you're at all interested in that. Maura goes on to say, will that army of the dead include Ned and Lyanna? If so, will Ned and Lyanna be able to speak to Jon, giving Ned and Lyanna a chance to reconnect and letting him know some of the truth about Jon's heritage? This is, I think, is a fantastic idea. So the first thing we have to say is, will it include them? And I think the answer has to be yes, certainly for Lyanna. She was buried there. Ned, however, his bones are not yet at Winterfell. In the books, they are somewhere, we think, in the neck. They're being carried north. They were quite a convoluted journey, having been released from King's Landing, working their way up north. But they have been, they're somewhere in the neck. That means that they're somewhere near Howland Reed. And also we've got Mage Mormont, the Mama Bear, and one other character whose name I forget for the moment, who have been sent off looking for them. So I think that what we will find at some point in the next couple of books is that coming up to Winterfell, hopefully just after it's been reclaimed for the Starks, will be Ned's bones. I think he will be buried there, and I think that he will then be one of those who rises again. Now, the interesting point, I think, is that this is not going to be rising again as dead bodies, because some of these are thousands of years old. We're not told of them being mummified or anything like that. It may well be more ghostly, which the kind of the image we have is the equivalent of the dead men of Dunharrow from the Lord of the Rings. If you remember, Aragorn sort of went and found these ghostly figures who came to aid of Minas Tirith. So that, I think, is the kind of the image we're looking for. This leads to the question, will Ned and Lyanna be able to speak to Jon? I think that's a fascinating idea. The short answer is I don't know, but it would be pretty amazing if they did. It would lead to an incredibly kind of ethereal experience, and whether or not to trust these kind of spirits who've come back. I think my gut instinct, though, is no. Those, when they get raised, those spirits are immediately going to be thrust into some kind of battle with the others. I think that's what's going to be happening. And they will not be just around to hang around and have chats with people. So I think that my short answer is probably not, but it's a fascinating thought that perhaps Jon could see his mother, perhaps having just learned who she was. That would be an astonishing thing, surely. Mora goes on to say, if the Stark dead rise to help defend Winterfell, do you think that will include the Night's King and his wife, who was probably one of the others? If so, would these two help protect Winterfell or fight on the side of the others? Again, this is a fascinating question. So, the Night's King is not the same as the Night King. The Night's King is a book-only character. He's a legendary character. So everything we're told about him, we have to take with a bit of a pinch of salt. But he was apparently the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Old Nan suggests that he might have been a Stark. Seems reasonably sensible. Pardon me. That he might have been. Starks quite often do join the Night's Watch. And he then led a reign of terror with his lady love, who he saw from north of the wall, who does indeed sound like a female other. So what we know, though, is that he was defeated, and his name was expunged from history. We also know that the bottom bit of the crypts of Winterfell has somehow been caved in. Now, my best guess is that that cave-in is not an accident just because it's old. There's no hint of any structural defects anywhere else in the crypts. This seems to be an incredibly magical place. It seems incredibly out of place for there to be just a random cave-in. So what's the other side of that? I think that is the first bit of the crypts where where he would have been buried. I think that the cave-in was to prevent anyone from seeing him, and I do not think that he and they will be able to get out. I also think, incidentally, that those tombs will be empty because I suspect that the Horn of Winter was blown, the legend talks of it, and that those first few generations of Starks did rise from their graves and fight against the others then once before. I think that's what happened there. And they caved in that bit just to cover up the signs bit. So I think that's my answer. So no, I don't think the Night's King would be coming to fight on behalf of the Starks. Sarah Norris says, the connection between Ghost, Jon's direwolf, and the Weirwood trees is obvious. So when Jon died, I always thought that the children would turn him into a White Walker, or at least or at the least John would be buried by a Weirwood and become part of the network. I never liked Melisandre's role. Do you think she will resurrect John, and how will that affect the connection we've all made between John and his wolf? Right. So my take is yes, there clearly is a link between Ghost and Weirwood trees, in as much as Ghost has got white fur and red eyes, Weirwood trees, white bark, red eyes, and all the rest of it. I think the link, however, is Bloodraven, who also has white skin and a red eye. Other characters who seem to be linked to him, like the Woods Witch, also have white skin and red eyes. So I think that is the link that's going on there. Now, I think what will happen is that John, the last word he says before he's killed is Ghost. I think that he will walk into Ghost. The question is what happens to his body. Now, it will probably be put in the ice cells or something like that. They will argue over what to do with it. There are so many factions in Castle Black at the moment. They will not know what to do with his body. So putting it somewhere down in the ice cells is probably a good plan. They could bury it, but at the moment they're not really in a burying bodies world. They're in a burning bodies world. So I think we're going to be left with John's body being put on ice, John out having walked into Ghost, and then I think it's a matter of bringing him back, not by bringing his soul back from the dead, but by calling his soul back from Ghost and putting it back into John. I think Melisandre will have a role in that, but it's not going to be the same kind of thing. It's not just going to be her bringing John back from the dead. I think it's going to be a matter of calling his spirit back from Ghost into his body. So I think that's what's going to be happening. And in terms of the connection between John and Ghost, it will be much, much stronger afterwards. How could it not be? John will be more wolf-like. We've already heard this from Varamir Sixskins, is that this is what happens if a skin changer walks into an animal after their body dies. Yes, they can stay in that animal's body for a while, but they lose bits of themselves to that animal over time, and eventually the wolf will win out. So John will become more and more wolf-like the longer he has walked into Ghost, and then when he returns to being John, he is going to be more wolfish, more feral, more like Ghost, probably more brooding, to be honest. Daniel Moranti, thank you very much for the compliment in the chat. We're all getting impatient for the Winds of Winter. George R. R. Martin has confirmed he is prioritizing it. I don't think there's much more we can do at the moment, but we're all very frustrated. Yeah. We're now moving on to the Weirwoods. That was sort of starting us up. Kraken Tacos, hi there, saying please speak about the Nightfort's Weirwood tree and how the gate functions. Is there a living being controlling that mouth? So the Nightfort is the oldest, the darkest, the biggest, and the most terrifying of the Night's Watch forts. It used to be where their home base was. They only moved to Castle Black relatively recently. And we see it in the books when Bran and his group camp there for the night, sit around a campfire, tell some spooky stories, and you go through the wall there, getting to the other side, and they go through it using what is known as the Black Gate. Now, the Black Gate is hidden. It's underneath ground. You have to go down into the well. You have to sort of climb down into the well in the kitchen. And it appears like this massive face weirwood face. And that already is a little bit spooky. But then the face says, "Who are you?" And you have to respond by reciting the Night's Watch oath, the first half of it anyway. At which point the mouth opens and it opens and it opens and it opens wide enough for you to walk through, and then it closes behind you. So this is a spooky old door. And as they go through, Bran feels this drop on him and he tastes it as it's salty. So the question is, what is going on there? The hints or the suggestion is that this is very old. This was there right from the early days of the Night's Watch. The fact that it's below ground certainly seems to imply that perhaps this is from, maybe this was the main way through the wall in the olden days. It shows that as it's Weirwood, this is from the time when the Children of the Forest were very much connected to the Night's Watch, because this is a Weirwood thing, but it's very much only letting members of the Night's Watch through. So there's clearly a connection there to the Children of the Forest and the Weirwoods. Now, I think that's probably about as far as we can go with it. You were asking about the Weirwood tree. There is a tree which grows up into the kitchen, presumably connected into this gate, because it's just above it. So, and that's not one of these huge sprawling ones. That's a lot smaller one. So it's almost as if it's only just sort of come up through the ground since the Night Fort has been abandoned. So it's only just the last couple of 100 years or so that that's been the case. So that's what's going on there. You also said, could I talk about one of the stories? And one of the stories you suggested was the rat cook. Somebody was asking about the rat cook earlier as well. So I will tell the story of the rat cook. This is a story that they told actually in the book when they were all gathered around the campfire in the Night Fort, because that's where the story was based. The story was based in the kitchens of the Night Fort. The rat cook was just a normal human cook working in the Night Fort. And something happened that we do not know. But a traveling king, an Andal king, somehow wronged this humble cook, and this cook decided to take vengeance. The king had come to the Night Fort for whatever reason, but had been given the hospitality of the Night's Watch, and there was a feast in his honor, and the king was served a pie, which he ate and really enjoyed, and asked for second helpings of, which he ate and really enjoyed. But then it came out that actually he had been eating the body cooked into a pie of his child, of his son. And this was the rat cook, or the person who became the rat cook, this humble cook who had killed the king's son, and baked him in a pie and served him to his father. And the gods were angry, and the gods turned to this cook and turned him into a rat, a huge white rat, a rat that was bound to stay forever in the Night Fort and could only eat the bodies of its own children as a payment, as it were, for forcing that king to eat the body of his child. And that is the story, the legend of the rat cook. Apparently, the rat is still there, eating the bodies of its children. It's a spooky story. And it's the kind of thing that George R. R. Martin drops all around A Song of Ice and Fire. These stories that, on the face of it, they're just extra little bits of background, but they are used on a number of levels. One of the levels within the universe is for them to be telling a moral, and that the moral there is the importance of guest right, because the gods weren't angry that the cook murdered someone. They weren't angry about cannibalism. They were angry about the fact that guest right had been abused. This king should have, or had been given guest right, had been allowed to stay, and that guest right had been abused, and that's what made the gods angry. So that's what the story was there for. Now, on the show, obviously, we saw what happened with Arya doing the exact same thing to Walder Frey. And it would not surprise me if there's an echo of this also in the books, that we see something like that happen, perhaps indeed happen to the Freys. It might not be Arya this time, but something quite similar might well happen. Friendly Neighborhood Nitpicker, thank you so much for the super chat, saying should read George R. R. Martin's Dream Songs books. They are very enlightening. Thank you. I recommend people do read George R. R. Martin's other books. As we say, he takes a lot from those other books as inspiration and ideas for what he does in A Song of Ice and Fire. So yeah, please do. Keeping the theme about the weirwood trees for one moment, let's. I said we were going to talk about Craster, and the tree which was in the village where he was born. Now, Lady of the Leaves says, creeping back to my ashy home after the big fire, as a spooky treat, would you talk about the weirwood tree at the village where Craster was born? Now, this, I'm very happy to do that. So this is a village called White Tree. And this village is not... oh yeah, Chelsea. Thank you, Chelsea. Prater saying Manderley's made pie a phrase. Yeah. So the village is not unique in the north of the wall. It is, and we would probably think village is too grand a name for it. It was 4 buildings huddled in a square with some outhouses and a sheep pen. And in the middle was a weirwood tree. And this was a massive weirwood tree. So massive, in fact, that when John sees it, he thinks that this is the largest weirwood tree he's ever seen, the largest tree he's ever seen, which means it's bigger than the one at Winterfell, which in itself is quite big. So this is a huge tree. Now, Craster was born there, that much we know. What else we know? When the Night's Watch on their great ranging north, they were finding villages abandoned by the wildlings. This was the 4th, I think, that they came to, and this was the point at which they released the first Raven back to say, hey, we've reached here, still everywhere's abandoned. But perhaps the important point we have here, they come across, incidentally, Sam, this may well be the same village that Sam was at later on when he killed the other on his way back south. He's not entirely sure, but it may well be. But the interesting thing is that when the Night's Watch were heading north, what they found was the village was abandoned, everything was gone, the wildlings had headed off, presumably to join Mance Raiders, massive gathering. And what they found in front of the Weirwood tree was charred bones. So clearly, what had been happening was that there was quite recently, probably just as they were going, they were offering up a sacrifice. Maybe it was of sheep, maybe it was something even more gruesome, but this was a sacrifice. And the reason they'd have done that clearly is because they thought this is what the Weirwood trees will want. The Weirwood trees are bloodthirsty. The Weirwood trees do always want blood. And that, if that is where Craster grew up, he will have been brought up in this idea that you make sacrifices in order to appease the gods. So when he later on is handing over his children to the others, he's just doing the same thing that he was brought up doing all this time, except he's not doing it to a Weirwood tree because he's not by a Weirwood tree. He's doing it to the others. He is offering up a sacrifice because he thinks that is how you appease the gods. So that, I think, is a fascinating little insight into Craster's brain as to why he might have been doing what he was doing. Aaron Daniel, thank you so much for the super chat, saying macabre, but ever think George R.R. Martin plans to not finish the books, making his stories an everlasting mystery? Us theorizing forever might make him happy. It is macabre. I think the answer is no. I sometimes fear he won't finish them, but I don't think his plan is not to finish them. He's very focused on Winds of Winter. He's talking about it all the time. He will do it. He will finish the Winds of Winter. My concern is not for that. My concern is for A Dream of Spring, which will surely take another 7 years at least after that to do, and he's not a young man. So yeah, I do sometimes, when I'm feeling macabre, fear that the books may not be finished, but I never fear that he does not want them finished. I think that he definitely does want them finished. Will Moss, thank you, says, when Ned and the boys find the direwolves, the stag's antler killing the mother portends Baratheon, leading to Stark's death. What magic creates this omen? Well, I think it's quite interesting you call it an omen. So there's two elements to this one. First of all, I think that this is this was the first scene that George R.R. Martin thought of when he was creating A Song of Ice and Fire. This was it from Bran's perspective, this scene. And so when it initially happened, it was not there as this kind of great, intricate foreshadowing moment. I think he made it quite foreshadowy as he was developing the scene, but I think that's what was going on there. In terms of an omen, now, my view is that this was manufactured by Bloodraven. This, I know, is all down to my general if in doubt blame Bloodraven, but I think it makes sense. So Bloodraven, if he brought the direwolf south of the wall, and then Bloodraven, let's not forget, is a greenseer, can control animals. He can create that situation of the direwolf dying or being killed by the stag just at the right time for the Starks to arrive. I think he created that. He made that happen because he wanted the Stark children, who all were talented to varying degrees, talented skin changers. He wanted to make sure that they got those wolves. So that was, I think, what was going on. He brought it there. He manufactured it. He made it happen right from the very beginning. It's noticeable if you read that again. It's not just a random thing. Bran hears something, thinks he hears something. Was it the rustling the leaves? But it's clearly someone is calling out in some way, in the same kind of way that he, in the future, called out to people like Ned and all the rest of it through the Weirwood trees. He was caught. His attention was caught, and I think that the person we know who has the ability to do that is Bloodraven, or possibly in a kind of a wibbly wobbly, timey wimey way, Bran in the future. But to make it simple, let's call it Bloodraven. So I think that's what was going on there. Did I see Joe Magician in? I did see Joe Magician. Joe Magician says hat or not. I don't know what you mean. I have a hat. But Joe Magician is in the chat. This is a good thing to remind me that he is going live tonight, later on at, I think, 8 p.m. At Eastern Standard Time, which is probably now in about 1.5 hours' time, something along those lines. So please do go and check him out. I will get Joe back on the channel at some point soon, I am sure. But in the meantime, if you need your Joe Magician fix, do go and check him out. He's got a great live stream subject, quite a spooky one as well, I think, lined up for you. So please do go and check. Let's 40 minutes time. Oof. Okay, so I'll see what I can be finished by then. So let's go back to some questions from my patrons. Ali Al Muhanna, nearly got it right that time. Sorry, Ali, saying, can you talk about the grayscale infected people on the Royne River? Happily. And this is because the latest installment of my Traveler's Guide, which is coming out tomorrow, is looking at the Sorrows. Now, the Sorrows is an astonishing part of Essos. It is, on my Traveler's Guide, probably the most magical place, with the possible exception of the Isle of Faces, which we never actually got to, but the most magical, obviously magical place we've been to so far. There is a story behind the Stone Men, and why there are Stone Men there, and why there's grayscale and all the rest of it. And the story goes that the Roynar, the people there who lived up and down the Royne River, they had been for many years involved in many battles with the Valyrian freehold. Slowly they were losing because they everyone lost to the Valyrians in the end. But they had this Prince Garin, who became known as Prince Garin the Great, who won a string of battles against the Valyrians, heading down the Royne River towards Volantis, winning battles in town after town after town, until eventually the Valyrians noticed what was going on and said, right, that's it, we've had enough of this now, we're going to deal with this once and for all. They took on Prince Garin's army, defeated him. His army was killed and scattered. He was placed in a cage, taken up to back up the river to his home city, which was Troyane. And he was hung there in this cage. And he cried out to Mother Royne, for the Roynar worshipped the river. And he cried out to Mother Royne and said, I need vengeance. I need vengeance on these people who've been destroying my nation. And that night, the Royne River rose up in this great flood and washed away the Valyrian army that had been there. Some survived, though. And the ones that survived, however, did not get away with it, because then they found that their skin was starting to get all grey and cracked. And this was grayscale spreading across their body and then eventually into their insides and their lungs. It would be a horrible way to go. And the city of Troyane became known as the Sorrows. It was misty, it was ruined, it was submerged, and it was where the stone men gathered. It's where they were sent because Grayscale carried on. It didn't just stop there, it was passed on and passed on. And from places like Volantis, when people got Grayscale, they would be sent up the river and dropped off in the Sorrows with some food and then left to calcify effectively. So that is what's going on there. It's a horrific thing, and when we see in the books, they kind of mangled it a little bit on the show by kind of mixing it in with old Valyria, but in the books we see Tyrion heading down through there, and we see the stone men, and the stone men do try and attack and try and drag him under. It is really quite terrifying, and also one of the least understood, I would say, probably least well explained little vignettes in the whole of A Song of Ice and Fire. We get this boat that Tyrion's on that is also carrying a chap called Young Griff, who later we know claims to be Aegon the Sixth, Fagon, as some of us call him. Now that passes through the Sorrows and under this great bridge called the Bridge of Dream, where the stone men congregate, and it goes under there. And then it seems to do this kind of strange time travel thing, or perhaps just be moved or something. And it ends back upstream and passes under the bridge again, at which point the stone men attack. Now, this is, as I say, it's probably one of the least understood and least explained. The only clue we have is the conversation that happens in that little gap we have before they realize that the boat has been moved back up again, that's the point at which young Griff starts revealing that he is a Targaryen, or saying that he's a Targaryen. That's when these conversations start happening. And I think the clue has to be in the fact that this curse, Garin's curse, the curse was against the Valyrians, the people who defeated his nation. And we then have this boat. When somebody going through it says, "Oh, I'm a Valyrian, I'm a Targaryen, I'm a dragon rider, or I could be a dragon rider," etc., etc. That's the point at which I think the magic kicked in, the curse kicked in and brought it back. I could do a whole video on that one, but I think, in a nutshell, that's what happened. Maura Lee, thank you so much for the super chat, saying for Bloodraven and your fabulous hat. Thank you so much. Yes, I think I've just realized, Joe, when you were saying get your timings right, yes, I think that the UK has moved, we've changed timings, and I think that the US hasn't. I think that always catches me out every year when the clocks change, slightly different times on each side of the Atlantic. So yeah, okay, so you're starting in just over half an hour. I'm sure we'll be done by then. Lahru Dina Lankara saying, any thoughts on the Shy Maid looping the bridge? That I was just talking about that one just one moment ago. So yeah, I did have some thoughts on that one. I think that was what was going on. I think it was the curse. Maura Lee says, how will science whites play a role in the battle with the undead or the others? Will Qyburn be able to make others like the Mountain? If so, will we get to see an army of them play a role? So yeah, so the science whites, this is what I call, so at the moment we've got the Mountain, who is this white who has been, or an undead, or whatever you want to call him, who has been animated by Qyburn. I call him a science white to try and make a distinction between the ice whites, which is what the others have been animating. Fire Wights, which is George R. R. Martin's term for what happened with Beric Dondarrion. And this seems to be something different. It seems to be animated by Qyburn and his understanding of the world science. So the important point, I think, here is the fact that the mountain is a prototype. Qyburn's not going to go, right, that's it, I'm done, finished now, not going to do any more. He will carry on his research, he will carry on honing things, he will carry on improving things. And I think it's incredibly likely that we will see more of these sort of undead people. We know that he's still getting bodies sent down there, so there will be more of these science wights appearing. Now, the question is, what role will they play? I think that they will certainly play a role, perhaps not against the others. My feeling is that the battle against the others is not going to reach down as far as King's Landing, but it may well play a role right at the very end. So I will be doing a series of videos setting out what I think is happening in the Winds of Winter. Broadly speaking, we're going to have a battle for King's Landing when Fagon's army arrives. I think that they will win. I think that Cersei is going to be moved out with Qyburn, and I think that they will come back in later to reclaim the city. And I think that's when the science wights will come to the fore, and it will be they who are the final baddie who needs to be treated in King's Landing. Casey of House Lawbridge says, do you think Harrenhal is actually haunted, as its history and the rumours around it suggest? I'm a sucker for supposedly haunted locations. Yeah, so if it weren't Halloween, I would say no, it's not haunted. It's just stories that built up around it. But let's go with it. The reason why people say it's haunted, it's more that it's cursed. And they say it's cursed because every owner of Harrenhal has suffered some terrible fate. They've had 4, 5, 6 different owners, each of whom seems to have been, their house has ended terribly, effectively. Burnt to death, massacred by Maegor the Cruel, that kind of thing. It's not just this family just unhappily died out. Yeah, they go insane or something like that. There are bad things that happen to families there. Happily, Littlefinger is currently the Lord of Harrenhal, so something bad will happen to him. But the question is whether or not there's some sort of causality behind this. Is there some sort of curse, some sort of haunting going on there? If there is, this is from the Weirwood network. This is my take on this anyway. Weirwood trees were chopped down and used in the building of Harrenhal. So there is a lot, and we know that Weirwood trees, they're not just, it's not just wood. There's a huge amount of sort of magical lore and spirits of the dead greenseers within the Weirwood trees. So it's entirely possible, and I think it's also entirely possible that given where the Isle of Faces is, they do not want to have a huge manned castle right next door, because then they would be constantly overlooking what's happening on the Isle of Faces. I think the Weirwood trees, the Weirwood network, would not want that to be a castle which stays there forever, where they're looking to have control over the lake. They would be very happy for it. So I think, yes, there's an entirely reasonable possibility that the Weirwood network have been slowly trying to ensure that this does not have a permanent hold. Whether they've had an influence on all of the different deaths involved in Harrenhal? I suspect not. I think it's just one of those things, but it is symbolically, kind of in a literary way, it's a symbol of the hubris of man. That's what it is. This was this greatest castle ever. This was the walls were taller than anywhere else. The Weirwood, the Godswood was larger than anywhere else. The towers were bigger and prouder and better than everywhere else. The Great Hall had more hearths than anywhere else. This was what it was supposed to be, the greatest ever. And then within a matter of days, it was just burnt to a crisp. And this is a symbol of humanity's inability to defend itself against the dragons. So that is what it is symbolically. And I think that ties in with the idea of the Weirwood network, who couldn't also not survive against the dragons. If the dragons decided they wanted to burn the Weirwood trees, they would burn the Weirwood trees. And so the Weirwood network have to work in subtler ways. I've got, I think, just one more question from my patrons to go. So if you've got any more questions, Daniel Morante saying, Magor the Cruel, why don't people name their kids with these beautiful old-fashioned names anymore? Yeah, so they obviously just called him Magor, but I like it there. The Cruel was what other people called him later. Now is the time if you want to drop any questions into the chat, and I will get to them in a moment. Actually, Donna Daly, thank you so much. Do you think that the religions with actual magical power as opposed to political power are related? I think, well, this is one of the big questions of A Song of Ice and Fire. I've done lots of videos and chats with people about the nature of magic in A Song of Ice and Fire. My take is that magic is related. Magical systems are related. The gods, George R. R. Martin is being very clear, we're never going to see the gods. The existence or non-existence of the gods is actually neither here nor there. The magic users connected to certain religions seem to be doing the same kinds of things that other people seem to be able to do. It's not that their god is giving them extra special powers to do anything. It's just that they tap into it and they have the faith, and they're often willing to make the sacrifices needed in order to do it. So I think the religions themselves aren't related. When you say the ones with political power as opposed to magical power, I assume you're talking about the Faith of the Seven. There are some magic users in a kind of a softer way of talking about it. In the Faith of the Seven, I think if you go to the Quiet Isle, for example, or you get the Elder Brother, there are sort of healing abilities that there seem to be there. It's just that they're not quite as strong and pronounced. In my view, this is not a world with lots of competing gods who are out there who grant powers to all of their adherents. This is a world where there is magic and people can tap into that magic through a variety of different ways. Christian Isidoro from Patrons says, Happy Halloween. Hello. Martin seems to fill Bran's chapters with some of the scariest stories in A Song of Ice and Fire. Bran specifically says that his favorite stories are the scary ones. In your opinion, what can this tell us about the future of Bran's story? I'm thinking of Jojen Paste here, of course. And what does it reveal about his character? Yes, I would agree, firstly, on your first point, that George R. R. Martin does give Bran this scary story thing. Old Nan tells him stories that scare him, and he seems to enjoy. Then we get the storytelling thing in the Night Fort. Then when we get up to the cave, Bloodraven's cave, then when you think about it, and we kind of take it in our stride now, but he's wading through, or Hodor's wading through bones. There are dead bodies just hung up on walls, or are they dead? Maybe they're still slightly alive. You see their eyes flicking open. This is a sinister, sinister place. Then Jojen Paste, yeah, is he eating his friend? This is dark, dark stuff. Why does George R. R. Martin give that to Bran? Well, I think that what's happening is that he is getting Bran immune to the idea of the bad things, so that he can attain this kind of Bloodraven state of seeing the greater good and seeing some things as just being collateral damage for achieving what will be a greater good at the end of it all. That was Bloodraven's whole thing, was that he was willing to do small bad things in order to achieve a greater good. Bran is being trained to be like that. He is being shown that there are small matters that he shouldn't be scared of, he shouldn't run away from. It's okay. The dark is okay. And so that, I think, is what we're being shown, is that Bran is becoming a very dark figure who will be willing to do what we might consider to be evil things in order to achieve what he considers to be a more important good at the end of it all. Zomb 13J3SUS says, yes, he's conditioning him to be numb to cruel and dark things. Jamie McKenna says, Maura Lee sent a super chat a bit ago. I think you missed it. Did I? I'm very sorry. Maura, let me just quickly go back. If this is one saying for Bloodraven and your fabulous hat thing, I did notice that. Thank you very much again, Maura. I do really appreciate it. Will Moss says, if Bloodraven caused the stag to kill the mother direwolf, did he want to send a message re-Baratheon, or was the Stark Baratheon symbolism just coincidence? And from Martin's Muse, I think it was, I mean, it may well have been him trying to send a message, but I think it was, the greater point is that this is George R. R. Martin putting in some obvious foreshadowing for us, the reader, rather than Bloodraven trying to send a message to the Starks, because as it stands, none of them have gone, oh, hang on a moment, it was a stag that killed that direwolf. That tells us a huge amount about what actually happened. So I don't think that he was actually trying to say. I think it was George R. R. Martin sending us a message rather than Bloodraven sending a message to the Starks. Let's have a quick look back. Carrie Carsnark says, I'm going to make a cup of coffee and drink it out of my amazing official IDG mug that I bought to show my support for Sir Robert. It makes everything taste better and chicks dig it. Well, thank you, Carl. If you are at all interested, yes, I have now got in Deep Geek mugs if you're interested, and t-shirts and tote bags and all sorts of other stuff. Link down in the description if you're interested. Thank you so much, and I'm really glad that you're enjoying it. You're doing a better selling job than I am. Sasuke says, do you think a Victarion's arm is truly magical now? Perhaps he only wants to use it to kill those monkeys he hates, though. No, so my take, so Victarion has a charred arm now that Makoro, who's this red priest who he's picked up, has been treating. No, I think that it's a general good rule of thumb not to believe anything that Makoro has been telling Victarion. This is Makoro who has been sent, his whole storyline is he has been sent to help Daenerys. That is the whole reason that he's going there. The whole reason that he's anywhere in the plot is he's going there to help Daenerys, because the priests of the Lord of Light quite literally believe that she is the savior of humanity. They think that she is Azor Ahai reborn, the prince that was promised. So he has been sent to help her. He has come across this this guy that George R. R. Martin describes as thick as a stump, Victarion, who has this stated aim of marrying her, dragging her to Westeros, and kidnapping all her dragons. Moqorro is pretending to help Victarion. He is not actually helping Victarion, not in any way, shape, or form. He is just playing him along to get the Dragonbinder horn to Daenerys, and that's it. He's if anything, the charred arm is some sort of curse or something. It's not a great magical thing going on there. Let's have a quick look back, see if they've got any other questions. I think I've caught up on all of them. Okay, guys, I think what I'm going to do is I am going to call it a day there. For those who are watching a bit later, in a moment, then you will see appearing somewhere here. There will be a link to other live streams that I have done, sometimes with other creators. Appearing up here, there will be a link to Patreon. If you're at all interested in supporting this channel, getting access to some exclusive stuff I do just for my patrons, please do click on that link to my Patreon page. Guys, thank you so much. I've had a really good fun time today, actually. I will put this one on just to be ending. Happy Halloween if you celebrate it. Go out, have fun tonight, and I will see you same time next week. Take care.